Thank you for joining, everyone. We will get started in just a few minutes. We're letting others join and get situated. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Unleashing Observability and Security in Cloud-Native Environments. My name is Kristen, and I'll be your moderator. Today, we're excited to have Guy Podjarny, co-founder and president of Snyk, and Mirko Novakovic, co-founder and CEO of Instana, with us today. Before I hand it over to the speakers, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, today's webinar will be recorded and available on demand after the live session and will be sent to you via email, or you can access it through Instana's website. We'd like to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the Q&A box on the bottom of the screen. We'll be answering questions during the presentation when possible, and we'll do our best to cover any that we miss at the end of the session. If you don't have any questions, no problem. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by handing it over to our speakers.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Mirko, co-founder and CEO of Instana, and I'm happy to have Guy with us today. Hi, Guy. Hello.
It looks like we lost Guy briefly.
We lost him. So I will start talking then. So Guy is the co-founder and the president and the CEO of Snyk. And I wanted to start telling the story that I met Guy the first time, I think it was in around 2017. So we both founded the companies Instana and Snyk in 2015. And we just raised our Series A by Excel at that time. And Guy was also looking for a fundraise with Excel. So he got recommended to me and told me that he wanted to raise that money from Excel. And so that's how we first met, and we started the discussion to understand what he's doing, what we were doing. And we both had the same idea, basically, in a different space. And that idea is that things are shifting left. So in terms of Instana, that's the observability and application performance management space, which is going more and more towards the developer. And we can talk about that during the session. And Guy was telling me that also security is going more and more towards the developer, and that shift left is happening also in that space. So that's where we met, and we started the conversation. And Guy at the end took the investment also from Excel. So we both were backed by Excel as one of our investors. and we met each other in different meetings, and we stayed in contact. And so I'm happy and proud that he hopefully will be back soon and join this conversation with us. And I keep that as a fireside chat here. So I normally have a conversation. We have no slides, and we would love to get the audience involved and ask questions about the topic, about Snyk, about the whole idea of shift left and security. And that's basically what we want. And also from my side, I can talk about observability and questions you have with regards to Instana and the observability space and the shift left. But this is not a product demo or product slides, product capabilities. This is more about talking in general about the DevOps space and how it's changing in security and observability. So I can, while we wait for Guy to rejoin, I see a first question here. Oh, here he is. Hey, Guy.
Perfect timing. Just the moment the webinar starts, my Wi-Fi at home shuts down. So we'll see how my phone holds up here.
That's perfect. Thanks, Guy. So I explained how we met first time. I don't know if you remember, but I was on the trip actually into my summer holidays when you called me, and it was with regards to an investment with Excel, and that's how we chatted. And I got to know you and the company and your idea. We both founded in 2015, and I said my idea was that this whole shift left is changing the APM and observability space, and your idea was that this whole shift left is changing the security space. And that's when I first heard about it. And you took the Excel investment. We both were back by then. We met several times, and this is where I wanted to start the conversation with you. Is why did you found Snyk, and what was your idea? And then we can talk. I mean, today, just you raised almost $500 million in capital, worth more than $2 billion. You have more than 2 million developers using your tools. So a tremendous success since then. But when you started, you obviously had an idea, and I would be happy to know your first idea and then how it changed over time. And if this shift left of security, it seems to really be happening, right? Otherwise the success wouldn't be there. So would be happy to get your point of view, how you started and how things changed.
Yeah, for sure. And, first of all, I appreciate all the way back then, the sort of the advice and guidance, and clearly the collaboration with Excel worked out pretty well for us. Having they led 2 rounds with a company later on. So really for me, maybe I'll say a word about my background because I think it's relevant and it kind of helped guide me to this idea. So I've been I'm Israeli. I was a part of the cyber parts of the Israeli army. And after that went into the AppSec industry all the way back to the very beginning of 2000, 2001, 2002. I said before it was cool. I'm not sure if AppSec is kind of cool today or not, but definitely a long time ago. And even back then, we had we were saying shift left. These were sort of the very first days of application security, still explaining why SQL injection is a thing you need to worry about, or cross-site scripting or others. And even back then, we were trying to embed security into the development process. And in fact, that company got acquired by a company that got acquired by IBM, and it's Rational and IBM that acquired us. And I personally built a product called AppScan Developer Edition, which was meant to be developer. Clearly, it's in the name, but it was really, in hindsight, an auditor product built into a development environment. That's really what it was, and we didn't really appreciate the importance of the developer as a user, and how that changes things. And then I left that world and I went into the world of performance and founded a company there and was acquired by Akamai. And I was CTO at Akamai for a bunch of years, which is much more the realm of indeed observability. And performance, as is one of the first to be disrupted by DevOps. And I had the benefit of being a part of that journey and velocity and such, sort of being a front row player or kind of a observer of the change there. And that led me to sort of 2 maybe realizations. One is this desire to shift left of security is stronger than ever. It's gone from a from an efficiency play to a necessity. It's gone from, hey, can you find it earlier because it will save you money, to it's the only way for you to be secure. DevOps is really predicated on independent teams that are working continuously, and security is none of the above as an industry. It's really teams that are outside, that are telling you what you can do, what you cannot do. It's not sufficiently automated. It's not sufficiently continuous in the sense that it doesn't really have a, we'll probably talk more about observability, but it doesn't really ascribe to this idea of, it's okay, you might ship something that has a bit of a problem because we will be able to quickly identify and remedy that. So it's neither of the above. So this is one realization, which is something must happen. It's an inevitability. It has to go there. Otherwise, there's just no way to scale security. And the second was that the DevOps gave us a playbook and an appreciation. And I remember that at Akamai, we had Fastly was a new competitor. And granted, this is with an Akamai bias, but still at the time, I'm pretty confident it was true, which was that, Fastly was this competitive CDN that was not as fast, not as secure, not as reliable. Again, maybe this is an Akamai bias, but I think we had sort of data to ascribe it. And yet some people swear by it, they loved it. And the reason for that was because it helped them work the way they wanted to work. And at the time, Akamai didn't, it didn't really provide those needs. And so the light bulb moment there, this is a bit of a long-winded answer, but sort of the light bulb moment was to say, if you want to get developers to embrace security, you need to build a developer tooling company, not a security company. And that's what we did. We call it today developer first security in our offerings. And we can talk about, there's actually, I think, some learnings around the choice of threats and concerns that helped us, that we chose to tackle first. But still, the core premise of it is build a company, anywhere from the logo to the website colors to the, of course, the sort of the product methodology and the bottom-up motion that gets us to those sort of 2+ million developers using the product. All of those are just a result of a totally different angle of thinking about the problem. And specifically in the product UX, it led us to build different capabilities that led to that success, right? Led to that adoption by developers. I think that's kind of the core origin story of it. And then, from there, clearly we had to choose threats and all that. And there's been a lot of evolution on that front.
That makes a ton of sense, especially with your background. And but it would be interesting. So I mean, as you said, I'm a performance guy, right? I'm coming from the performance space, monitoring space, and I know Fastly and Akamai, and these things are all in my space. When I hear about security, it's more like a big black hole for me, right? There are so many different companies, and I would love to get your kind of view. How does a developer get in touch with Snyk? Is that so? When I'm a developer, I'm coding. So when do I need Snyk? When do I get to you, and how do I work with you as a company? And then this is kind of the bottoms up motion, right? And then how does it evolve inside of a company?
Yeah, no, so it's a good question, and it was indeed a part of the changing, right? Because I think if you replace the word Snyk here with sort of a cyber company or a security company, I think the answer is you don't. You really kind of wait until your security team chooses a tool and kind of comes to you with some with an edict. Snyk is different. So we're a product-led organization. We have a very easy to use product to just get started. It is free for open source, and so open source projects use it. Maybe, you know what, I should take a step back. Let me concretely talk about sort of the threats that we tackle, and I'll describe a bit of an evolution there. So Snyk's, dev first security is the approach, but then the first problem that we tackled, and I'll expand to the other ones in a sec, was what we call open source security, or rather securing the open source that you use. So as we develop, we build, we use libraries that in turn use libraries that in turn use libraries, and that's awesome. It helps us move fast, but it also means we need to kind of take ownership of those. Some of those might be vulnerable. They might be problematic in various ways, might have a license problem. And so Snyk's original offering is what I guess in Gartner parlance is a software composition analysis. We talk about Snyk open source, so open source security. And what it does is it helps you figure out which components are you using, are they vulnerable, and then because of the dev first approach has automated remediation built into it. So a lot of emphasis on helping fix it. And I'll talk about the other products. I'll come back to your question on how you discover, but that was our core product, which had to expand. We started with the Node.js ecosystem and we expanded to many, many others over time. Today we support the vast majority of them. And then open source security kind of blazed the sort of the path to developer first security. But then what we saw is that container security was coming up, and more customers are asking us, why, how do we have anything around container security? And it was a bit of a surprise because container security was perceived to not be dev land too much. It was really kind of much more in the operations side. And after we inspected it, we realized that there's actually a different angle here. If you think about dev first, and you can say, well, containers are in many ways not the evolution of the VM as much as the evolutions of the app. It is really defined in the sort of the Docker file sits there in the repo, and you define things in it. To patch a container, you need to run a build. That's a part of the application. And so we built, once again, like a different security solution for container security with that sort of lens of containers as the evolution of the app, not the evolution of the VM. And we subsequently expanded that. Today we have two more products, both of them kind of with that lens, that we call as the broader scope cloud native application security, which is its application security solutions, but they are for this sort of revised scope of the application, which includes containers, includes infrastructure as code, and today also includes code, so static analysis of your own code. And in general, we look at everything in the repo. We sort of look at and we try to offer more of a consistent, holistic approach to say, as a developer, we have your back. You come along, you make changes, we'll find problems, we'll help fix them. And we're building today. We have 4 products in our portfolio. Over time, we'll have more, and all of them. And sorry, this was a very preparational kind of answer to your question about how do you discover it. And then all of those work in this sort of core element of a bottom-up developer-led approach. So you can come along, you can use our command line interface, which is a simple kind of brew install or npm install Snyk. You use it, gets millions of downloads every month. Very Swiss Army knife. You can plug it into your pipeline. You can run an ad hoc test. You can do any of those. That's very flexible. And then we have opinionated integrations. Probably the most popular of those is to GitHub and Git systems, where you just go to GitHub, you do a next experience, and we connect to your Git repositories. We figure out which libraries are you using without needing a built app. That was kind of a part of the ease of use flow. And then, as I said, we find which libraries you're using, which containers you're using. And when we find vulnerabilities in them, we open fix pull requests directly to the repositories to actually not just tell you about the problem, but fix it. And it's one of those dev first moments of, an auditor's job is to find issues, but a developer's job is to fix them. It's to go further along. So one of many symptoms, if you will, of that sort of a dev first or manifestations.
And talking about fixing, can I think about it like if I have a dependency? So I'm more a Java developer, not a Node.js. So you have Maven, right? And if you use Maven, there is this joke that you always download the internet, right? So you want one dependency, but actually it triggers a million more dependencies. You're always right, hundreds of others, and you're just seeing all these jar files pulled out, and you have no idea what that means and what the implication is, right? Which always is somehow, I remember as a developer, it's super scary, right? Because you don't know all the licenses and all the vulnerabilities that could be there. And that's what you are analyzing, right? You're analyzing all the dependencies and you check if there is a possible security issue. And fixing, would that mean you are patching my Maven file and put in, so if I'm using version 1.1 and that has a problem, but there's a fix in 1.12, you will automatically update that version? Or just for me, how can I imagine you looking at it, and how do you fix it?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Most of the time, you can think of Snyk as this sort of security savvy developer that is on your team versus something that is looking to circumvent the dev team. So in this case, you're using library A that uses library B that uses some Jackson down the road, which is vulnerable, and which is a common occurrence. So first of all, you use Snyk to just figure out that is even the case, that you're using Jackson, that it's and where is it in the tree that is A, B, C, that is using it, and then you rely on Snyk to find out that there's a vulnerability and will alert you to it. And then the fix to it is typically figuring out what version of A do you need to change, like what you are at A 121. And downstream, it gets you to a vulnerable version of Jackson. Telling you to upgrade Jackson is no help because you can't. Technically, in Java, for instance, you can override. You can actually provide a newer version, but that's a very high-risk action to take. And so
Yeah, lost Guy. We lost you. We lost you for 10
see
seconds
if
or so.
the Wi-Fi gods here kind of help us back on. 1 sec.
Here we go.
Yeah, let's see if this works. Yet another network on the I'll give you a shorter answer. I don't know where I lost you, so I'll give you a shorter answer to the library question, which is fundamentally it's about figuring out using A that uses B that uses C, and C is vulnerable, and telling you which version of A do you need to upgrade to be safe. Aspect of the developer friendliness.
Guy, you're breaking up again. Maybe, yeah, that's good. Omar said it. Maybe you turn off video while you are on your mobile device. Yeah, that's a typical Zoom web conference problem these days. Sorry for that, guys, but I think we all know that 2021 and still the internet is not stable everywhere. I have the same problem sometimes at home, especially I have 3 kids. If my 3 kids start streaming Netflix and YouTube, I have those weird issues sometime on my network. That's why I went to a co-working space today. I'm in a co-working space, the webinar, to have a good connection. Anyway, I will try to entertain a bit here. So as I understood, Snyk really does is they actually, for the developer in CI/CD systems, they check all the dependencies, they check for vulnerabilities. And what Guy was explaining is, if you have A, component A using B using C, and there is a vulnerability down the stream, they will figure out how you can switch those components, your dependencies, to a version that actually fixes that vulnerability, right? And they keep a database, so they have a database, their own database with vulnerabilities and with dependencies, and they keep that updated. So, hey, Guy.
I think we're gonna switch to a more mobile version of communication here. We'll
no worries. I was trying to explain how Snyk works. So I was starting. You were at service A has B, and you're trying to figure out which version of A you should use so that the vulnerability downstreams get fixed, right? And that's something, if I remember right, you explained you have this database, right? You keep the database of vulnerabilities, of dependencies, And that's kind of one of your secret sauce, is that you have all these dependencies and versions, and you have the understanding what you can switch to do this, right?
Yeah, correct. So, I always kind of go again. I kind of always come back to that sort of developer focus, because that's kind of the guiding principles behind everything we do. But fundamentally, it is a security value proposition. So one of the key kind of elements to keep in mind is that you also need to provide the security depth and security expertise. What happens in the world of open source is that CVEs just don't cut it. If you're familiar with CVEs are the sort of standard database, the National Vulnerability Database, NVD, that has this common vulnerability and exposure number that is really designed for appliance vendors and others, like big established companies, that when they want to tell their clients that there's a vulnerability, they will open a CVE. It'll be a standard number to communicate it. And what happens in the world of open source is a library maintainer would find a vulnerability, would fix it, would state as much in the release notes, and that would sort of disappear into the ether. And so what we do is we listen, and there's no flaw here, right? You can't really expect all maintainers to know and care and bother to go and file a CVE for each one of those. That's cumbersome. That system is just not designed for it. And so what we do is we have a system that listens to candidate vulnerabilities across the ecosystem. It funnels them to our analysts, where there's a curation exercise. There's an expert that looks at it and says, yes, this is a vulnerability or not, adds relevant information to help you, a developer, figure out whether it's, how urgently should you address this. Some of it is just standard severities through sort of standard models like CVSS, but then others are, is there an exploit in the wild? Or what is the vulnerable code within the component? And so combining all of those, they make up this database. And that database today powers actually a lot, even in the APM space. Players like the Linux Foundation and Google Chrome, various APM players like Datadog and Dynatrace and others license it. We have Trend Micro and Tenable and Rapid7 on sort of the security operations, kind of endpoint security. So really became a bit of a body of knowledge that a lot of the ecosystem powers. And then probably most importantly, it comes back to our users to tell them which issues do they even have. That's separate from the tech we had to build, which is every dependency ecosystem is its own unique snowflake. And we talked before about POM XMLs and Maven. It's very different to package JSON. That's in turn different than the sort of many ways in which you can get dependencies in Go. And so each one of these things requires its own quirkiness, which I'm sure you see in sort of Instana's, like in the observability side as well, right? Like every ecosystem has a need for some dedicated support. And so we had to build something that approximates the dependency trees within the ecosystem, within the repo, to be able to point out which libraries are being used here, and then tell you that they're vulnerable, and then, as we started with, tell you how to fix them.
That's interesting. And so when coming back to this initial situation, so now developers use your tool, maybe start with this open source version. And then I would imagine, I saw logos like Google, Salesforce on your website as customers. They have thousands of developers, right? Then at some point, this gets centralized and is a central tool for all the code in the company, or how's that happening? Not from a sales perspective, really from a process and organizational perspective, right? I would imagine it starts in one project and people figure it out, and then it spreads, and at one point, it expands, right? Yeah.
It goes up. It sometimes goes sideways and sometimes goes upwards. That's the gist of it. And I think fundamentally, so because the product is free, typically people are by the time they talk to us, they would have already tried the product. So oftentimes free users would see it on some open source project because it's free for open source. They'll try it for free for a sort of low volume usage of their own. They might graduate to actually purchasing a product for a team or a section of it or a business unit. And then as we demonstrate success, then we will go up There is typically, I think that's one distinction between security maybe and observability or other dev areas, is security is still a little bit more broad in its purview. So I think if a certain team is using Instana, right, and has I'm estimating here, but my view here is that, if a certain team is using Instana and they're getting great value from it, and another team hasn't sort of seen the light yet, it's probably not it's not a problem. It doesn't sort of reduce really the value maybe that the first team is using from it over time, organizational knowledge and such. For security, the security organization also needs to govern. So they also need to know that they have a handle on this risk. And for that, they need a certain amount of breadth. And so what we come across is that this manifests in two ways. One is in teams that adopt it, there's a tendency to say, okay, if it wouldn't be the tiny teams, they would still be in our free tier. And typically by the time something is purchased, it is more of a governance unit. So it might be a slightly bigger group that buys it. The other piece that it manifests is that it's interesting is that for developers, a Java developer couldn't care less that you're, amazing at PHP or vice versa. And they shouldn't, they care about their ecosystem. But for a security person, if you cover 30% of their stack and you don't, then it means they need to buy another product for the other 70% of their stack. And so what we've had to do over time is we've had to evolve. Like we always go depth first. We always pick an ecosystem. We build what we believe to be a great developer-friendly product for that ecosystem, and then we do have to broaden to other ecosystems and support that. And so today, we have that in every one of the products. Snyk open source, Snyk containers are very, very broad already. But for example, Snyk infrastructure as code at the moment supports Kubernetes configurations and Helm charts and Terraform, but is still adding things like CloudFormation or other aspects of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And how do you see this space evolving over time? I think that's something I'm also thinking a lot about for Instana, because I think we are, I don't know how you see it, but I think we are still at the beginning of this whole shift left movement, right? There's still a lot of traditional organization and process out there, and things are moving to the left. I think there is no doubt about it. But I sometimes I'm struggling for myself, especially in the observability space. I'll give you an example. So observability, there's a lot of development also for open standards, so that you have APIs and like open telemetry or open tracing, so that people can put in, so developers can add their own traces or their own metrics to the code, which makes a ton of sense, right? Because the developer knows best what to look at and how to add the traces. But it also puts a lot of burden on the developer teams, and not all teams have the skills and the time and the tooling to do this. So you will have blind spots, right? And so the question is, how much do I want to really shift left, and how much do I want to automate and put into some like tooling space? For us, it's like one of the core elements of Instana that we auto discover and auto instrument and trace. So how do I balance that, right? That I would say not a struggle, but there's something I'm thinking a lot about, is how much of this stuff will really move to the developers, and which developers, right? There are infrastructure. If I'm a core Kubernetes developer, of course I should add some metrics and monitoring and observability things to my core infrastructure. But if I'm building a banking app on top of it, how much of my time I should spend with observability and monitoring and security and all the other things that are, every vendor is talking about shift left. And sometimes I ask myself, okay, but if you shift everything to the developer, poor people, right? They have to do now everything, right? Security, CI/CD, infrastructure as code. They're responsible for everything. So my question is, how do you see this space evolve? How much of the security space will shift left? And where do you see a natural like barrier where you think this is still a SecOps or whatever we want to call it, like a security topic, which will not be in the hands of the developers?
Yeah, I think So SecOps is a bit of a different topic. Maybe we come back to that in a sec.
Yeah.
But I think to the shift left, I like to say that the real motion is not shift left, but top to bottom. Because really, like shift left is tends to be interpreted in a very technical way of put it earlier in the development process, put it into the IDE, put it in the build process. And while that's very valuable, it's not the real change. Like the real change is this notion of going from a dictatorial kind of controlling security team to one that is empowering, to from one that looks to secure the applications to one that looks to empower developers to secure the applications. And I think that shift is different. It's a different mindset because you need to think about the user in question and what is their constraint, including the constraints you just said, which is they're overwhelmed with a lot of information. They don't have security expertise. It's one thing to do the work, but there's also a certain learning and knowledge that you need to have ahead of it. And so really what you want to do is you want to think about top to bottom and how do you empower these teams to be independent and to run. And that absolutely includes making it easy. You can even continue this analogy of the direction and say, like, even further bottom is to build it into the platform. How many problems can you just make go away? Can you just, if you're using React, cross-site scripting goes away. You just use a platform that's different. If you give them a certain library to use for input sanitization, you take away a certain set of needs to know what should they sanitize for and what should they not. And so there is an element of make it easy. And the other way to think about it is there's how much you care about something and there's how hard it is. And you need to care about it more than it is hard. And that's probably true for everything in life, but I use this analogy for security specifically. And I feel for developers, what has happened is that security was just too hard, even the ones that really care. So you had to really care. You might care because they're going to fire you if you don't do it, right? Like, it's an organizational mandate. You might care because you're a very developed security conscious person. It might be your industry. But you need to really care to overcome the high bar of how hard it is. And I think what great technology can do, and what Snyk or Instana, like our job in the ecosystem, is to make it easy. Make it easy to be secure. Make it easy to, I don't know if it's like make it easy to be observable, although that's an aspect of it, but it's more like make it easy to identify problems and respond to them quickly. And so I think that's our view. And with that view, I don't think it ever goes away. Like, I don't think there is really a barrier. I think what will happen to the security industry is happening in the sort of the ops industry, is that it changes the role of the security team. The security team is increasingly, as you see organizations, a builder and a provider of services. It's a supporting organization. It is one that has metrics and governs, but is less controlling. It actually tells the businesses, look, you're responsible of making your application secure. We're responsible of, one, tracking that you indeed are, two, equipping you, making it easier for you to do that work, and three, being an escalation point. That's kind of a part of two, is we hold expertise. So if you're not sure, come to us and we'll help you out. Right? Come to us about any topic. It's a little bit different than the DevOps to SecOps relationship, if you will. So which is its own topic. If you want, we can.
You a little bit. As far as I remember it, you are kind of not the inventor of the SecOps, but you created the whole community notion around that topic, right? Isn't it that you have the SecOps community and you build a whole topic around it?
The DevSecops motion is something that we're very much like. We have DevSecon that we run and we're doing it. Yeah, SecOps is a bit different.
Tell me about SecOps and DevSecops. What's the difference?
So DevSecops is probably more an evolution of DevOps than it is an evolution of SecOps. So SecOps is just it's more a delineation. There's AppSec and there's sort of SecOps. So it's almost like today there's maybe a delineation that they say pre-deployment and post-deployment security. Pre-deployment is more about building resilient software. Post-deployment is more about identifying breaches. There's an area in between a little bit that is post-deployment pre-breach, which is knowing what infrastructure you have and whether it is well configured and all that. But I think DevSecops is the buzzword that is used to drive a lot of this motion of bringing security into the fold of DevOps, because at the moment it's quite outside. But I think Mirko, for your world, it's not for all of our worlds, but especially kind of in the APM space, I think there's another interesting thing happening, which is the convergence of security operations or SecOps and kind of resilience operations for the whole APM world. Because it's probably, I don't know if people listening are kind of as mindful of it, but put yourself in the shoes of a security officer, right? So a chief security officer, and you have many hats, but you have two primary ones. On one side, you need to secure the product that the customers are providing. So I think that's the piece that is probably easiest to relate to here in APM land, which is you need to know, like, are my systems patched? Am I being attacked right now? You want to shift left and kind of put this into the development process. So that's that whole thing is probably best titled product security. And alongside that, you also have to secure the enterprise, and you need to ensure that all the employees' systems are patched, and that not only, like, on one side you want to say I'm not being breached because nobody's sort of attacking an unpatched server. On the other hand, you want to say, well, none of my employees is sending information over email, or leaving their laptop unlocked in some machine and data might have been stolen that way. So you also need to be worried about the sort of corporate security or securing the enterprise. And today, those two sides are the ones that drive the affinity. They want to say, well, there should be one security incident response process that the SOC, the Security Operations Center, will handle when you suspect a breach, you suspect a leak, and there's a process to follow, regardless of whether that process is, of whether that leak or that risk is on the product side or on the enterprise side. And my sense, my crystal ball, kind of my expectation is that over time, this line will delineate that it would be more important that incident response to a security concern on the product side would align with the incident response to a resilience issue or an outage. It'll be more important to be aligned on that side than it would be to align with the incident response process of an employee kind of emailing bad information, right? Of just using simplistic, simple example. And so I think if you ascribe to this perspective, then you can expect that there's going to be a desire for some tool consolidation, right? Then you would want the tools that monitor, that provide observability for your resilience to provide observability for security hints. And also, guess what? It's probably 80%, 90%. It's the same signals that are just interpreted in a different way. So I think that's going to happen. So the SecOps and APM, or sort of resilience operations, I expect will converge a lot, and we'll see the impact of that in sort of the vendor space.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm not sure if I'm happy with it, right? As a tool vendor, it's just a lot of things that are actually converging, right? When I started in Instana, we were an APM player, right? Application Performance Management, and that was a very well-defined category. In the last, I would say, 3 years, this whole space has changed a lot, already driven by consolidation and by new use cases. So systems like log management or classical monitoring and APM are already converging, right, under the observability umbrella. But you can see that vendors like Splunk have metrics and traces today. On the other hand, vendors like Datadog acquired logging solutions, or New Relic to provide logging. So all the tools are
Right.
converging to a to basically have all the data in one tool. And now the interesting part is a lot of the security tools use exactly the same data, right? Security often is based on logs, right? It can be based on metrics. It can be based on traces. There are actually one of the or the founder of AppDynamics, Jyoti, has founded a company called Traceable AI, which is basically a new company that does security on top of traces, right? So figuring out if there are basically breaches in the code, in the application, by analyzing what's really happening in your application, right? It's very, very close to the development use case. So yes, I can see that definitely, that in this market, there's a lot of convergence going on. People just want one tool. And to tie it back, I didn't stop thinking about it, the shift left, and you said it's a top down, right? This is something I haven't thought that way, but I think you're right. And I think these are two different things, actually, right? One is really shifting things more left in the process, right? More towards the IDE, CI/CD tools to have this early in the stage. But the other is really that the role of the developer changes, right? And they are more empowered and enabled. And this is all about easiness of use, right? And easiness of use also means that you need maybe one consolidated view, one data set, right, to work on different use cases and get the value and get the stuff fixed that you need to get fixed, right? I think that's also a driver for this consolidation, that the developers don't want to have 15 tools to do the job. They want easy to use platforms that they can leverage and maybe even extend for their own usage, but it must be easy to use. I totally agree. And I think that maybe comes with the shift left, right? With the shift left, also the top-down approach is automatically coming, but it's two different things, right? And I like the way you think about it, that it's a lot about empowering, making it easy for people to adopt and use tools. That's a big change compared to you have been in this space like also a long time, like I was. That was never the case like 20 years ago, right? It was not about making it easy to use but today,
not at all.
Not at all. Even and enterprise software is becoming like consumer software, right? It's democratized. It must be easy. It must be a good UI. That's how people want to consume enterprise software these days. Yes. Oh,
no, absolutely. And I would go further even, and I would say that when you look at like no code and low code, fundamentally that's the continuation of the same journey. So you're thinking, we have these elaborate applications, and they, don't we want to build stuff into the platform to make it easy for them? The end of that journey is the whole no code. Can you just sort of diagram your app and make it go away and have the platform worry about everything? Now my view is we're never. There would always be a reason for sort of deeper programs and kind of more elaborate systems, but I think that's the continuum to think about, right? Like that's the it goes all the way to can you help developers be as no code or as low code as can be? And some of those people are even starting to be called developers. These are sometimes referred to as citizen developers. The people that are not necessarily with sort of a technical background, but are able to describe a logic flow and
and we have a question here. It's just saying AI ops ? And I love that question, even if it's just a word with two question marks, because I'm not sure how much AI ops affects your business yet, but it is affecting my business. So there is this new word AI ops, and Gartner is using it heavily. And as you know, we got acquired by IBM, and IBM has a Watson AI ops product, which is going pretty well. So there's a lot of things going on, and I would say it that way. It is applying machine learning and applying AI on top of the data. In our case, so it's involved with APM. So with APM was always a tool that gathered a lot of data, right? I mean, we have tons of data, logs, traces, metrics, and we try to figure out how to help the user to find the problems in all that data, right? That normally implies some kind of context, and it implies maybe some statistical analysis. But I think machine learning is pretty early in our space, right? Applying real learning and things. But AI ops is accelerating this. I think and for me, by the way, in my world, AI should be supportive. It shouldn't be something where we talk about the machine learning algorithms or tell you that we have the best intelligence impact. Good machine learning, in my point of view, makes things easy for the user and automates things for the user, right? And I think that's how AI ops is changing and evolving APM. It is really about enabling the normal user. So 10 years ago, you needed a 3-week training to just understand what you are seeing when you open your APM tool, right? And it needed a super expert user to find problems in a complex system. And I think AI ops can enable basically every user with not a lot of knowledge to figure out what's going on, and maybe even automating things, right? Getting into an autopilot where we fix problems in production automatically based on a trained workflow that we learned from other users or from other customers. And I can see similar things in your space, to be honest, right? Why wouldn't I use, and I saw that you have some sort of AI and intelligence messaging on your website. Don't know, but I have seen it on your product section that you are building some sort of intelligence and AI for your security products. So can you share a little bit how you see this evolving? Is AI a big thing in your space, or not really?
Yeah, I think so first of all, I agree with your premise, which is AI is no good. A user shouldn't care if there's like some expert rule system behind the scenes or AI. Doesn't matter as long as it produces good output. I do think that over time, AI produces things that are not perceived to be kind of something you can glean. So, if done right, it can actually find things that are not there. But to do so, it needs, technology evolves exponentially. So it always feels further away than it actually is, because it's hard to think exponentially. It's hard to think that things will evolve at that rapid pace. But still, I think it would. There's progress to be made, before it can really kind of replace a lot of functionality. But I think really AI shines when you have a lot of data, and there are many ways to look at it. And so I think observability is a great place for that, because there's all these signals that something might be wrong. Security is another space. In security, I'll kind of split it in two. The one is what we do, which is in program analysis. So analyzing all the different paths of a program and understanding all the APIs and all of what they do is sort of an NP-complete problem. It's not something that you can really do because there's just too many of them, and you definitely can't do it in a feasible fashion. So we actually recently acquired a company called DeepCode, which comes out of the Zurich kind of ETH University. There's brilliant technology that has deep machine learning in it around program analysis. So what it does is, for example, when it learns the system, you connect it to, I'll give an example of, you give it a rule and you say, here are like 10 sources of information, like form fields, and here are 10 APIs that read input from a user. And here are 10 sinks, which are security sensitive sinks, like a database call or something like that might be a destination for a hack. Go find me others. And what the system does is it analyzes all the code in GitHub and then some, and it finds patterns. Says, hey, it looks like a pattern of code here that it looks like the start of it is also a source. Maybe that's also a form read. And here's another one for the sink. And it's a semi-supervised system that allows us to build rules very rapidly and keep up with so the pace of just explosion of APIs and interfaces, and again, come back and talk to a developer in their language, right? Instead of like, yes, could I have analyzed all those APIs down to sort of the native API that does an IO read? Yeah, I can, and we do sometimes. But as a developer, would it be useful to you that I point you to sort of that binary? No, that's not your sphere. Your sphere is the API, the sort of http.get that you called that got you that sort of form field. And so we use machine learning mostly for that, mostly for understanding patterns of vulnerabilities in code, and similarly fixes. Okay, if I see a lot of those patterns that have changed over time, then I can figure out, hey, here's a pattern of a problem, and it repeated many times, and then it was oftentimes changed to this pattern. Okay, can I figure out that that's a fix to a problem? And again, I'm oversimplifying here, but so that machine learning is massively powerful, and we expect to apply it across all of our tech, not just in sort of the core program analysis. I'll say one thing around the ops side of it. Security, SecOps, for AI ops for security, while very useful because there's all these hacks and, again, this sort of fits the sort of description of like many signals, and can you identify something goes wrong? The difference between that and APM is there is an adversary. There is someone who is actively trying to bypass your protections, and you don't have that in APM. So in APM, there's no villain. There's nobody trying to take you down typically. If so, it moves to security land, and so AI becomes a bit more difficult because you need to identify the actions of someone explicitly trying to evade them. It's still a room for AI to help, but it also means it's another layer of difficulty that solutions need to overcome.
Yeah, I think we have those events where people try to take us down. It's accidentally, for example, doing a big load test or having a commercial during the Super Bowl, and then you have 1 billion requests, which we were not prepared to take. So that can happen, but it's not like a security threat.
They're probably not villains in that sense. They're probably not evildoers. So
no, I agree. And my last question, because we're coming to an end here, and it was really fun talking to you, Guy. I mean, you started in 2015 very successfully. Your company is growing, and what I can see, I mean, millions of developers. But how do you think this space is like? Is this still the beginning, or how evolved is this? I have the feeling that it's still, though you are so successful, it's still like the early days of developer security, right? I think the majority is still classic.
I think it's the good news, for our space is it's just a drop in the bucket right now. There are so many more developers to reach, and there are so many more so much more security value to provide to each of those developers. Look, our market size is very simple. It's the number of developers. Like, think of every developer in the world. For every one of those developers, there's a certain amount of security value we can provide. And that value might be greater for a back-end engineer working for a bank than it is for someone building a mom and pop shop with WordPress, but it's not zero for any of them. And so as more developers, as more and more developers, more people become developers, right? The developer community grows as the security importance grows. I don't know that we'll be done anytime soon. And we're absolutely at the very, very first steps, early innings, to sort of use baseball parlance here, of this industry, and I think there's the list of things that we are excited to build and expand and improve both the security posture for all of us and developers' life and kind of make them easier is very, very long. So yeah, much more to come.
Yeah. So Guy, thank you a lot for taking the time. Thank you for overcoming your Wi-Fi issue very professionally, switching to a mobile device here. Thanks a lot. And
thanks for the patience on it.
And looking forward to chat with you again pretty soon. Thanks. Have a good day.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining. Just to let you know, a link to view this on-demand webinar will be sent to you via email. You can also visit our website to access the recording. Have a great day, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, Guy. It
Thank
was
you.
good chatting to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No, no worries.
The moment we got started, the